Thank you for coming. My name is Jess Cragg. I'm the curator of exhibits here at the Historic Trust. Today, I figured I would talk a little bit about how we here as Pensacola are going to interpret the American Revolution 250th anniversary. So 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, it's been 250 years. And the story's a little bit different down here in Florida because we were a British colony. So we were not part of the American Revolution as you normally think about it, but we were actually incredibly important. One of the lenses in that I'm looking through is going to be the maritime aspect of the city because we were a port town. We had ships coming in and out all the time, and it was basically the only means of travel and import and exporting goods. So that's kind of what I'm going to go through today. I haven't started yet. Okay, so 2026 marks 250 years since the Declaration of Independence. There's been a big push across the United States asking communities how they fit into this revolutionary idea. For a lot of America, it's very easy, right? If you're up north in Philadelphia, in New York, you have the people, you have the places, you have the battles, you have all of the big things that happen during the American Revolution. For Pensacola, we're about 2,000 miles away from all the big things that happened, but we were still really incredibly important to the overall ideals of the American Revolution. So one of the things that we wanted to do when we started looking at this anniversary is trying to tell the story through the lens of Pensacola and how to do that through an exhibit space rather than just doing something like putting out a book or a magazine. We really wanted to immerse our visitors in this story and let them kind of get a feel for what Pensacola looked like at the time. Go back again. Okay, so an overview kind of our history. Pensacola has been occupied by Europeans since 1559. The Spaniards came in about 1517 and started mapping the area. 1559, they sent an expedition here to basically create the first multi-year, semi-permanent settlement in what is now the United States. All those qualifiers give us a leg up over St. Augustine, so we are technically older, we are technically first. Because we were here 1559, St. Augustine comes around 1565. So the Spanish occupied this area for a very long time. It flipped a couple of times. We were basically the colonial hot potato. We went from being Spanish to French to Spanish to British to Spanish to American to Confederate to American. We are all over the place. We're very contested down here. But kind of during the American Revolution, this area was occupied by the British, but only for a little bit. So after the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War, depending on which side of the pond you're on, there came the peace treaty. It was called the Treaty of Paris of 1763. And that ended the fighting between England and France and Native Americans and their allies. Spain was sort of involved, but on the fringes. As part of that peace treaty, during the war, England had seized Havana, Cuba from Spain. Havana was a major trade port for the Caribbean. It was basically the epicenter of Spanish trade. The British seized it, and as part of the treaty, they agreed to give it back to Spain, but only if Spain could give them something in return. So Spain gave them Florida. So they made a swap. So the British came in here in 1763. When they arrived in Pensacola, there was almost nothing here. There was a falling down fort. There were a couple of wooden buildings. That was it. It was very sad as a little town. So it was basically an outpost kind of at the northern Gulf of Mexico. The British immediately came in and redeveloped the town. They looked at this little fort that was falling down that had big gaping holes in it that couldn't have kept out anybody, and they went, all right, order of business. We're going to rebuild the fort. We're going to relay out the town. Instead of having a house here and a house over here and a house here, they brought in an official royal surveyor. His name was Elias Durnford. He came in and he goes, you know what, we're gonna make a grid system. So this town is gonna be laid out in blocks, just like every civilized place in Europe was. So they came in and they really changed the layout and the look of Pensacola, and we can still feel those effects today. Those blocks and those streets are exactly the same today as they were in 1765-ish when they started laying this out. We did change the street names, but the streets are the same. So they kind of remade this town. So by 1767, this is what we have. So we have the fort that they've kind of shored up a little bit. We had a big square right here, which was the parade grounds, which is today Plaza Ferdinand, so that big park just on the other side of this building. So we are roughly like here-ish, somewhere, where this building is sitting. This was the original water line, which today follows Main Street. So everything south of Main Street is fill. It's been added in over the years. We've got another parade ground over here. That's Seville Square today. This area has all been filled in. This right here would have been right here. George Street is Palafox today. They had George Street, Charlotte Street, so they were very big on the English names. So that's kind of what the layout of the town was looking like in 1767.
We're sitting in front in the middle of the fort.
Yeah, we are. Yep, exactly. Yeah, so the Pensacola Museum of History, the old T.T. Wentworth building, it was just inside those fort walls, basically, which is why right out here in the back we have archaeological discovery area of what was the commanding officer's compound. Yeah, so kind of to orient yourself. So we are smack dab in the middle of inside the fort right here. By 1767, you can see how far these lots went out. This one up here is one of the most important lines right here. Any guesses as to what this street is? Come on, look. It's north of here, south of Cervantes. It's Garden Street. Garden Street.
Okay.
Yeah, so see how it's green? All of these are garden plots. Every family that got allocated a lot had a corresponding garden plot up in the northern part of town, which today doesn't seem that far. But at the time, you know, a couple blocks, about a quarter of a mile, they had garden lots. So those green spaces are all laid out and they correspond to a lot that people were given at the time.
What are they, like 40 by 40?
I don't know. I'd have to look and see what the size were. They're fairly small.
It's about 40 by 40.
Yeah.
Okay.
So each family would be like, a family would come in. For example, this is now kind of near where City Hall is. One of these lots was owned by Sir John Lindsay. His corresponding garden spot would have been up here. So everyone would have had a spot to be able to go and get fresh food and places to kind of go and get their own food. Pensacola was not necessarily known as a gardening haven. We have really sandy soil, but some stuff did grow here. Watermelons grew here really well, cabbages, kind of things like that. So every citizen that came in got their own garden plot, which is why Garden Street's now called Garden Street. Yeah.
Back street behind the garden lots was called, or is called?
What's the one right north of Garden? Chase?
It's really just that front row, and I've always been curious.
It's either Chase or Gregory, I think, yeah.
I think it's in the book, it's such a smaller scale, you can't see it. The name is that smaller.
Yeah, yeah. So it was probably like what is now Chase or Gregory Street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's on Chase.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So this is one of the maps that Elias Durnford actually made to lay out the town. So we actually have all of these numbered lots. We have who lived in all of them. So we have that name in those lists. So it's becoming a pretty big town by 1767, 1770s. By early 1770s, trade here was absolutely booming, right? So we are kind of isolated. We do have a little bit of connection to Mobile, which was part of West Florida at the time. West Florida went all the way to New Orleans, the Mississippi River. We had a little bit of connection to some smaller towns, some smaller villages, some Native American villages to the north, but our biggest kind of trade access was the bay, right? We had ships coming in and out all the time. We actually have a ledger book on loan right now, and I'll talk about it again in a minute, from 1767, where they had, I think, over 6,000 gallons of rum come in 1 year. So yeah, they knew what they liked. But there was tons of trade goods coming through the town. I have next? Okay. So this was created by another surveyor, George Gold, and this is kind of an iconic view of what Pensacola looked like. He had a survey boat, it was the HMS Florida, and he was putting around in the bay for several years, charting the waters. It's not like he was the first surveyor to ever make a maritime map of Pensacola, but they're not gonna trust the Spanish maps. They're British, so they wanna make their own maps. So they had George Gold come in, and while he was out on the boat, he drew this sketch of what Pensacola looked like. So this is a great example. I mean, I can't tell you if he took artistic liberties or not, he probably did, but this is probably pretty close to what it looked like if you were out on the bay looking towards the town of Pensacola. So you've got, it's kind of hard to see here, I'll zoom in a second, but we've got the British flag flying so we know what time period it is. These are all the boat traffic, all the little schooners and the dinghies that are going on in the bay. And then I think I zoom in. Let's see, do I zoom in? I do. So if you zoom in here, we've got the British flag. This is what the fort wall looked like at the time. So you can see it's very low. And I mean, really, you're not keeping many people out with that. But this is along the bay, so it kind of gives off the illusion of having a strong fortification here. This would have been the governor's house. It's the only two-story house with an actual roof. All of these others had palmetto roofs, so just leaves and branches over the top of them. On the top here, this is a little bit to the west. The west side was the more affluent side, where kind of the more well-to-do citizens lived. And the detail is incredible, but you can see people on the beach. You can see what some of their houses looked like. This guy over here, one of these houses is Sir John Lindsay's. I'm not sure which one. I'd have to ask Margot. But he has a nice little fence. So a lot of people were kind of living here at the time. George Gold was a Royal Naval photographer. He was elected to the Philosophical Society alongside Benjamin Franklin in 1770. So this is before the American Revolution broke out. Tensions are high, they're getting higher, but this is still very much a part of the colonial world, right? So we're the 14th colony. He also was fairly involved in politics, had a couple of acts passed. He was captured here and then died shortly later, but his paintings matter because it really gives you a good visual of what the town looked like when people arrived here. The British decided that this little fort right here was not going to cut it, so they built a bigger fort. So this one comes just a couple of years later, and this is kind of what most people recognize as the Pensacola Fort. It's the most well-known one. Again, to give you a little bit of kind of where we are, this right here, George Street, is Palafox Street. So this would have been the parade grounds. We are right now, right about here. This is the commanding officer's quarter, so that spot in the back. The museum would have been right about here. This blockhouse, the foundations for it are right in front of the museum. They're excavated, they're nice and laid out with brick. You can go see them. This would have been kind of the interior of the fort, right along that high water line. Seville Square would have been down here. Couple of blockhouses. This guy right here, this blockhouse, was basically right in front of this building. And we know that because there was an archaeological excavation done in 2001 or 2, or maybe 9, early 2000s. And they were digging right out here on Government Street, and they found a massive square post that was part of the foundation for this blockhouse. I would have brought it down here, but it's really heavy. It's currently on my office desk. It is upstairs. It's about yay big, square. It is massive. It is real dirty. But yeah, so it's upstairs. We can go upstairs after and I can show it to you. It's huge, but that was part of that blockhouse right there. And that was found just outside the front doors. Yeah.
Where was the governor's blockhouse, breakout blockhouse? Was that outside the fort, just outside?
No.
It's hard to see from shore, you know.
Yeah, so it would have been inside it, so that would have been part of this commanding officer's compound right here. Yeah, so kind of right in this area. And then they had, I'd have to look at the actual description, but this was the barracks. We've got new kitchens established here. Shell yard, so the batteries would have been over here. Another one. All of these are labeled, and you can kind of look and see on the legend what's what and where it goes. But,
Oh, that one always forts.
yeah, so this is kind of the iconic fort. So by the 1770s, if you were sailing into Pensacola, this is what you were met with. Much more intimidating than the kind of ramshackle logs with big holes in it that they found when they came. We know a lot of the information of what Pensacola looked like during this period from personal letters, correspondence, and diaries. There are only 2 known diaries that were written by women who lived in British Florida during this time period that have survived until today. One of them was written by Elizabeth Digby Pilot. She was married to a man named Henry Pilot. She had a 3 or 4 month old daughter named Catherine Mary, and Henry was stationed here. So they left from England. She followed him, came on a ship, took about 9 weeks, and they arrived here in Pensacola. Her diary is so good. It is filled with details of what it was like here. I mean, down to the temperature. She goes through and says, oh, it was 99.75 degrees today, which, I mean, she's very accurate, I guess, and very detailed. But one of the things that struck me the most when reading it is her description of when she arrived here. She's coming from England, right? She may be coming from probably not a very wealthy area. She didn't come from London. She came from a small village outside. She didn't have a ton of money. She married this man against her father's will, so he cut her off completely because he wanted her to marry someone that wasn't a soldier, someone that would have done something better with their life. She was like, nah, I'm going to marry this guy anyway. So she has no family that's talking to her anymore. So she follows her husband here. They've been on a boat for 9 weeks at this point. And she writes, what words can I find to describe to you the horror we felt on the appearance of Pensacola? The harbor is a fine one. That's nice. We got near the town, anchored, longing to disembark, and breathe a freer air than we could aboard a ship. But alas, where were we to go? The garrison, as it was called, was filled with the shattered remains of the 35th Regiment, which had suffered severely during the war being the French and Indian War. This is only 1 year after. She gets here in 1764. They had gone to Pensacola to be relieved by troops from Europe. It was our unhappy fate to do this. What a contrast was presented between our fine, healthy, blooming men, fresh off the boat from Europe, and the poor, emaciated soldiers of the 35th. Nor was this more striking than the joy they experienced, the prospect of going home, and the feelings of sorrow our men experienced at the wretched place they had come to. She hates this place. She is like, what did I sign up for? This was her first impression of the town. And remember, this is 1764, so this is right after the British moved in. There's still a falling down fort here. There's barely houses. She goes on to say that she ended up having to basically room with a bunch of the other wives until they could find an individual house. They were able to get one because her husband knew a guy. They got a house. It immediately flooded. They had to go on every night when it rained. They would have to drag their bed from one side of the house to the other to avoid the leaks from the roof. And then everybody got sick. Then her husband almost died. He made it. Her daughter did die. She got sick. All of her friends that she made here, they got sick. Their children died. And then everybody kind of acclimated. It took about a year and a half, but she did settle in. She started making friends. She started kind of accepting her life here. The British were at work every day making this place better and better, building better houses, getting the fort up and going, finding resources, getting those garden plots established. So she was kind of here when all of this was happening. She ends up staying for about a year and a half. She describes her friendships here. She describes them going up the river camping. They had excursions. They went to New Orleans regularly for carnival season. So travel between the two cities was still very much happening. Then her husband gets a new position and he gets relocated to St. Augustine. And she cries. She does not want to leave this place. She was like, I can't imagine leaving Pensacola. I've built a life here. She has friends here. She loves it. The next page, after she leaves Pensacola, she gets to St. Augustine, basically describes it the same way. She's like, this place is terrible. So she kind of have a pattern. She didn't stay in St. Augustine too long. They eventually did go back to England. I don't think they were over here during the American Revolution. I think he had already gone back to England by then. But she does give a very good kind of description of what the town looked like. So by the time the American Revolution starts going, we have this question. Is Pensacola a maritime town or is it a military outpost? It's kind of both. They've built some more fortifications. We've got this big main fort right down here. They've built a couple of outposts out on the island where they can help protect the bay from enemy ships coming in. It's basically just 2 cannons and a couple of guys. They've built Fort George up the hill, which is now kind of, if you go up Halifax where it starts to go uphill, Fort George is right there. The Queen's Redoubt was a little bit past that, kind of in the North Hill area. I think they had a third they were working on, or had it. Prince of Wales Redoubt, that was the other one. So they're really kind of digging in here, and they're intending to stay. Yeah, it was like kind of up in that same area. They were basically building up there to protect from any potential land attacks. And then they had the fort down here and the small outpost garrisons out on the island to protect from any maritime attacks. The main economic driver for the British here was the deerskin trade. They were working very closely with local Native American tribes who would bring hundreds and hundreds of deer skins in. They would load them on ships. They would ship them over to Europe. Europe would manufacture them, turn them into gloves, shoes, bags, clothing, everything you can think of is made of leather, books. So that was kind of the big main economic driver. So England knew it had a good thing going here. They were making a ton of money. They had a pretty safe place. People were moving in. They were doubling their population pretty rapidly. So what could go wrong? Nothing. It's great. It goes great. So part of building this exhibit, we were looking for documents and items to tell this story of what it was like to live here. Parker Destin is one of those people that has been absolutely invaluable in building this exhibit. He's a local collector. He's part of the Destin family, lives in Destin. I'm not sure his wife is thrilled, but he loves to go into auction houses and find all of these West Florida early documents. So he's got tons of amazing things. He's got muster rolls. We've got ship registration documents that came out of Pensacola because this was becoming the seat of West Florida for the British. He has one of the earliest known letters from British Florida by a soldier written in 1763. It was one of the first English detachments that was here to take over from the Spanish, and he is also complaining about it. He's not having a good time. We have a trade book, that's the one I mentioned earlier. It's a couple of years, 151 pages from a single merchant, and it's just all rum. Rum coming in, rum going out, rum coming in, rum going out. Some soap, some molasses and sugar, but all of that trade's coming from the Caribbean. And then he has this. Anyone recognize that signature? B. Arnold. Sound familiar? Benedict Arnold? Yeah. Parker just handed me this letter one day, and I've been squealing ever since. He has a letter written by Benedict Arnold that describes the possibility for the American army to attack and take Pensacola. It was written in Philadelphia, 1777. He's writing it to a man named Richard Peters, who was head of the Board of War, who was, funnily enough, the same guy that accused him of embezzling money, which caused him to turn his coat and go to the British side 3 years later. But he's basically proposing that it would take 1,000 men, and the way to attack Pensacola is to use the rivers. You would go inland, go down the Ohio Valley to the Mississippi River, come all the way down to the New Orleans, Louisiana territory, and then you could either, according to his letter, you could either get on a boat, sail out into the Gulf and come in through the bay, or you could cut across Lake Pontchartrain in canoes and then come via land through Mobile and then into the west side of Pensacola. He's saying it's going to be a lot easier to go by boat. You should do it that way. And he did note in his letter, there's probably a bunch of British ships in the bay here, so be prepared for that. They're well fortified in Pensacola. But if we could take this city, We cut off the British trade in the Gulf of Mexico, and that is hugely important in the middle of a war.
So they're patriots, not royalists.
Arnold is a patriot at the time. People living here, they were British citizens. They were loyalists. They had no idea what was going on. I mean, I'm sure they knew what was going on, but they had no intention of joining the American cause. This was a British city. It was the same for them being here as they would if they were on English shore. They were so far separated from any of the other kind of colonists and the rebellions up north that it really didn't occur to them, hey, maybe we also should be rebelling against England, because this was a military town. Everybody here was military and their family, and then like surveyors and things like that, like employees of the king for the most part. This expedition, just to note, it never happened. This was just a proposal by Arnold, but the Americans never made it that far. All right, so then we come, what time is it? Am I still going long? Oh, I'm good. So we've got to the 1770s, so that's kind of what England's looking. Then the war breaks out 1774-ish, but Declaration 1776. This is still a British colony, and then there becomes a Gulf Coast campaign. It wasn't incredibly well thought out, but they tried. And this is basically relying on the Spanish, and only the Spanish, with some French help thrown in. This is not a campaign that was necessarily authorized or conducted by American continentals. Washington was aware of what was happening down here. There are several letters where he mentions it, but he's just asking for updates. He doesn't want anything to do with what's happening down here because he is very busy up north. So eventually, Spain officially joins the war. It is important to note, Spain did not side with the Americans. Spain declared war against England at the same time. France allied with the Americans. There is a treaty of alliance, both parties signed it. Spain, on the other hand, was like, the Americans are just a byproduct of this. We really want to go after England again. So Spain kind of jumps in the middle, but not on behalf of the Americans. It just works out for the Americans as well. So once Spain joins the fight, Bernardo de Galvez is governor of New Orleans, and he sees this as the perfect opportunity to take back Florida from the British. Because after all, the British are very distracted. There's a lot of money and wealth in Pensacola. Soldiers are coming in and out all the time, but we're well aware that all of the fighting up north is staying up north. So Galvez goes, well, what better time? So he starts a campaign, and he basically goes from New Orleans. He gathers a lot of reinforcements from Cuba. France is down there. They're getting a whole fleet together, and they start making their way across the Gulf, and they're taking out every British outpost one by one. There's several along the Mississippi River, right along that Louisiana-Florida territory. He takes those. He gets to Mobile in 1780, captures the city of Mobile. The next and last stop is the town of Pensacola. Unfortunately, just like Spanish of the past, a hurricane hit, scattered his fleet, caused a little bit of a delay. So he didn't actually get to Pensacola until 1781. Took about a year to come back. But he finally does, and he basically invades the town in a very, I don't know how you would say this, a very egotistical way. So the story goes, if you've ever heard the phrase, yo solo, in reference to Pensacola, that's attributed to Galvez. His entire fleet, he had about 8,000 men under him, which was a mix of Spanish, French, Native Americans, enslaved people, free people of color. Everybody's parked out there past Santa Rosa Island waiting to come into the bay, but they're all scared of the British cannons that are on the island. The French commander in charge of the fleet says, absolutely not, I'm not entering the bay. There's a sandbar right there. I'm going to stick my ship right there, and the cannons are just going to obliterate me. Galvez says, this is our last stop. We have to take this town. So he climbs on board the ship himself, orders it through the pass. The cannons, turns out, can't even reach the ships. Totally fine. So he moves his people in here. But the story goes that he said, yo solo, I alone will enter Pensacola and take it. He was not alone. He had 7,999 men with him. But he got in here. They fought for about 2 months. the British put up a pretty good fight, actually. And we know a lot of this information based on a logbook. This logbook is from the HMS Mentor. This was a British ship that was stationed here in the bay. It was a sloop of war. It wasn't huge, but it was pretty formidable. Had a full complement of cannons. This is also upstairs on my desk. But the captain, Robert Deans, kept a very detailed log of everything that happened every day during 1781 in this book. On March 11th, he says, I observed the Spanish fleet at anchor outside of Rose Island, Santa Rosa Island, Pensacola Beach, consisting of 1 ship of the line, 1 of 40 guns, 2 frigates, 1 of 20 guns, 1 snow of 22 guns, the Galvez brig, 2 sloop galleys, 11 square-rigged vessels, 10 polcares, 10 small vessels, sloops, and schooners. That was a huge fleet for 1 boat to tackle. There were smaller British ships here, but really the Mentor was kind of the one that was supposed to protect the town. So he sends the Mentor farther in. He knows he has no chance against all of these ships. So he gets all of the crew off the Mentor. He fires a couple of warning shots. They come in town. He sends the boat up the Blackwater River with a skeleton crew because he knows he's not going to win this battle. So he wants to keep the Spanish from getting as much British assets as he can, hoping that he could basically negotiate peace terms with Galvez and they could use the boat to ship everybody out of here. That would have been a great plan. The boat, unfortunately, didn't like that plan. The boat floundered. The crew couldn't get it off the bank because I think it was a storm that happened and pushed it onto the bank. So the crew thought, well, we were told to keep this out of British hands. So they set the ship on fire and they left. And they came back to Pensacola. And I'm sure when they got back here, John Campbell, who was the commanding officer, was like, you guys are supposed to be in a boat 4 miles up the river. What are you doing? And they're like, yeah, boat's gone, sorry. It is important to note, we still have not found this ship. She is up the river somewhere. There have been several expeditions from the Archaeology Institute to try and locate her, but so far no luck. So one day, we might find her. Galvez wins the battle. He successfully captured Pensacola in May of 1781. This was England's last outpost in the Gulf of Mexico. Spain is now in control of the entire Gulf, everywhere from Louisiana all the way around. England is cut off down here. It doesn't sound like that big a deal unless you remember the English were using their Gulf port towns to conduct trade and to stage supplies and men for battles that were happening farther north. All of a sudden, these English were stuck. The ones that were here were trapped. The ones that weren't here couldn't get here. The Spanish controlled it all. And that had huge ramifications. Most notably, a couple of months after Galvez captured the city, the Battle of Yorktown happened. The Battle of Yorktown happened under General Cornwallis, who did not have supplies and reinforcements that were here in Pensacola because of the Spanish. The French were also heavily involved in Yorktown. They cut them off by sea. Washington's men met them on land. It all came to a head. Eventually, Cornwallis surrendered, and that was the end of the American Revolution. So Galvez and his actions down here had a huge impact on when and where the final battle took place. You can't definitively say that without Galvez we wouldn't have won. That just doesn't make sense. But we did certainly impact that. So, how do you make an exhibit out of all of that? It's really hard. Object-wise, we only have a few objects. I've mentioned we have the block post, we have the logbook for the Mentor, we have a lot of Parker's stuff, the Benedict Arnold letter. We have about 8 million buttons. We have some bricks. We have a 2,000 square foot gallery to fill the entire 3rd floor of the History Museum. And I have to tell this story with some buttons and a piece of wood. So it's very tricky. I've worked on this for over a year now, and we've finally kind of figured out how we're going to do this. So we're very excited about the exhibit. And this is kind of what I'm hoping visitors will experience when they enter. So they're coming in and they're going, okay, Pensacola is a British colony. Why does this matter in the American Revolution, right? As they go through, I'm introducing you to these real people that we've talked about. Elizabeth Digby Pilot, Benedict Arnold, George Gold, Elias Durnford, all of these people are wrapped up in this story. So you start to understand the people that are living here. You understand why Pensacola matters, all of the trade that's coming in, all of the military support that's coming here, why everyone wanted this city. Hopefully by the end, you walk out with an understanding of how important we were to the American Revolution. If we've done our jobs correctly, that's hopefully the lesson you will get from the exhibit. In order to build this, because we only have a few objects, here's some of the places that we've reached out to basically for our research purposes. We've gotten quite a bit of records from Florida Memory, state archives, academic databases. We've really relied on the UWF Archaeology Institute, particularly Margot Stringfield, who's done a lot of work in this era. The Bath Records Office is who holds the original Elizabeth Pilot diary. They were not overly willing to send us the original, but they did send us a scan of it, so that was nice. We're getting some paintings on loan from the Naval History and Heritage Command, so the United States Navy Art Collection. We're getting some of that stuff brought in. We also used a lot of Library of Congress information in this as well. So, all of that to say, on May 9th, there will be an exhibit about this. We are determined to have it open. We are currently in the middle of building it right now. We are installing walls on the 3rd floor right now, so I'm going to do that after this presentation. But we will have maps, letters, firsthand accounts, a lot of archaeology that we're borrowing. It's taking up the entire 3rd floor. Oh boy, it's fine. We're doing great. We're not stressed at all. So if you are around, May 9th is also our annual open house. Philip is going to be villaging and fighting and colonialing and living historying all day long. We're going to have tons of people out here. It is a free admission day. So if you're around, you're more than welcome to come down, join the festivities. And it will be the first day this exhibit will be open to the public on the 3rd floor, if we can get it done. We will. It will be done. We will get it done. It will be done. So that is essentially how you take a British colony and make it important to the American 250 celebrations via an exhibit with no objects. That's it. That's all I got.